First, as the dust settles on another extraordinary week in politics, what does business think of the turmoil on the leadership? Heather Ridout is the outgoing Chief Executive of the Australian Industry Group and, as of 2 weeks ago, a Reserve Bank board member. I spoke with Heather Ridout a short time ago. Heather Ridout, thank you for your time.
It's a pleasure,
the Prime
David.
Minister received a strong mandate from her caucus at the start of the week in that leadership ballot. How would you like her to use that mandate, that added authority she's supposed to have?
Look, I think it's been a very big week in politics, but the government does have a bit of clear air, and there's some very important issues on the agenda. We have the Fair Work Act being reviewed. We have the carbon pricing coming in from the 1st of July. We have a business community that's quite uncertain about the instability of politics, basically, since the last election. So we would really like the government to open up a genuine dialogue with business around some of these issues. The Fair Work Act, we've put in a very detailed consultation, submission to the consultations, but we don't want to just have it on the table and not really feel anyone's listening to us. And at the moment, we've got 100 plus amendments in favour of unions and changes in favour of unions, and nothing much for business. So that genuine consultation with business, where we're going to get something out of it, would actually be a helpful start.
And is it a relief for business that the leadership issue has been settled, at least for now? Was this creating a problem for confidence?
Look, I'm not going to go into that. That's party politics. The parties go through those periods. I think what we're more concerned about is getting a bit of clear air for good policy. Australia's got some pretty significant issues in front of it. We've got a competitiveness challenge affecting 80% of the economy, the big employing sectors of the economy, low productivity underpinning that, high dollar turbocharging that. So we've got a Fair Work Act that's simply not working for large swathes of Australian business, for example.
I want to look at that, but first you may not comment on this, the reshuffle that Julia Gillard's about to announce. Are there any particular changes you would like to see or not see, and in particular with the economic team?
Look, I'm not going to comment on who the Prime Minister should have in her cabinet, but there are some very strong performers, and I think in the economics team, I mean, Penny Wong and Wayne Swan may not always get the credit, but they're a fairly formidable combination.
Right. On the carbon price, which you mentioned, is still an area of great business concern. One of the things Kevin Rudd did say in the lead-up to the ballot was that he would want a review before the end of the year with a view to bringing forward the floating price as soon as possible, a transition from the fixed $23 a tonne price to a genuine floating price. Now, this would seem to echo some of the concerns that you've raised as well.
Well, we're very concerned that the starting price is too high. You know, $23, the world price is at $11.20. It's been going around that point. We've got the Japanese, the Americans, etc., all backpedaling on carbon pricing. So we've got the world's leading carbon price at a time when the industries that are going to pay it are on the bones of their bum. So it's a really, really tough scenario. So we certainly would like some opening of a dialogue around that issue. Now, by legislating these prices, it's very, very tough, and moreover, by putting in place compensation measures wrapped up in them, dependent on them. So we need this consultation, this discussion sooner rather than later, not just at the end of the year.
Because the European price has crashed and the Australian dollar has risen since all of this was legislated. Are you saying that there should be some sort of review before this comes into place before the middle of the year?
I think the government's going to have to do something about the fact that we've got a $23 to $25 price over the next 3 years, when the European price is wavering around the $11 mark, often lower than that. And over the next 2 to 3 years, I can't see much changing in Europe in that regard. The US recovery, whilst we're seeing some encouragement, is really the weakest since the Second World War. The Japanese, who led the Kyoto process, I mean, they're in all sorts of trouble, structurally as well as at the moment. So Australia's sitting out there with the sectors of the economy that are going to have to pay the $23, uncompetitive, and with a very, very high carbon price.
The government often argues that the impact of the carbon price on Australian manufacturers will only be the same as a movement of 1 cent in the Australian dollar. It's not much, they say, in other words. Are they right on that?
Look, the electricity price will rise by about 10% because of this. But, the interesting thing is our members that we surveyed, 500 of them recently, on average thought prices were going to rise by 70%. So the whole message out there is very, very confused. But there will be a significant rise in the order of 10%. But the view of industry, this is going to confidence and how they see the future, is it'll grow by 70. Now, the programs to support the information programs for industry they haven't even been wound out yet. So there's a lot of obfuscation,
so
David, around this issue.
Better advertising campaign.
Well, there needs to be a lot greater engagement with business, and I think that's gone to the fact that the consultation, we felt the government did consult a lot with us, but the output wasn't good for large parts of industry, and the view out there in industry land is this is a very iniquitous tax and that they're going to be hit right in the eye with it. And I would add that electricity has been one of the few competitive advantages that Australian industry's had in world manufacturing, and that's been coming to an end because electricity prices have been rising. Over the next few years we're going to see big rises in gas prices. There's a whole lot of things happening in this space, and the carbon price is going to be on top of that, and it could be a major problem.
One of the other big debates in industry at the moment is about support for the car industry. Mm-hmm. Now, the Coalition plans to wind back about $500 million worth of assistance. The government argues that would destroy the car industry. Would it really have that much of an impact? And do you think the current levels of assistance are about right?
Look, I think what we have to remember in Australia is that the car industry is a very important industry. It's a hub of innovation. What happens in the car industry often gets translated into broader parts of the economy, not only in manufacturing. They are leaders in process engineering, innovation, etc., etc. So it's an important industry worth having here in Australia. The other issue that needs to be remembered, and the Henry report that I was involved in really about a lot of this, we're going to have trouble in attracting investment into Australia when we have a currency stuck at a level above $1 American, and it's been now at that level for quite some time. Investment can go to a lot of other places in the world who are much more competitive. We need to make it competitive for the car industry to invest in Australia, and so every country around the world, developed economy, supports the car industry. Our support here is much, much, much lower than they provide. So I think it's a given. Both sides basically say we've got to support the car industry. The argument is about how much. I think the government initially had that $500 million particularly in the green car area, and companies were depending on it.
So you would rather see it stay?
Oh, absolutely.
I
think it's to the benefit of the whole economy. The multipliers in employment are very strong in the car industry, 5 or 6 to 1. I mean, manufacturing generally, for every job in manufacturing, about 3 is created elsewhere. In mining, it's only a couple. They're very important activities, and it's vital that we keep them in Australia.
You mentioned the Fair Work Act. The review is underway at the moment. Are you saying you don't think business is getting a fair hearing in this review that's underway?
Look, I'm very concerned that we're playing defensive here rather than being able to achieve genuine and important changes that are badly required. The industrial relations landscape in Australia is becoming quite difficult. We're seeing a lot of disputation. We're seeing a lot of unlawful industrial action, which really nothing much is happening about it. We've now seen the construction industry bill just about passed. The Senate inquiry is just finished. Very, very bad piece of legislation. And we've put a submission to the Fair Work Act highlighting the issues that we think need to be changed in this huge piece of legislation that was brought down, frankly, as a response to work choices. So we're very concerned that we have no problem with the panel. I'm sure they'll give us a good hearing. But whether the government is really open to changes that are in favour or being sought by business, I think is a moot point, and we'll be pushing very hard. We really hope Minister Shorten is open to have a genuine dialogue with business about this rather than going through the motions of an inquiry.
The bottom line is you want some form of individual contract.
Well, we want a range of issues. I mean, there's issues around what you can have take industrial action and put in agreements. This is a fundamental issue. It's fundamental to manufacturing, construction. It's a really, really big issue. So there's a whole lot of issues around the bargaining process. There's issues around agreements and agreement making. So we've put in something like 40 amendments that are required to the Fair Work Act, and we've got credibility to do it. We've taken 16 appeals. I mean, we've done the work and we know the problems.
One other area that Tony Abbott argues is a workplace productivity area is paid parental leave. He has a far more generous scheme on the table. It's facing some internal criticism in the Coalition for being too generous, but what do you think about the idea of full replacement salary for working mums up to incomes of $150,000?
Well, I have a very firm view. Paid parental leave shouldn't be paid for by employers, and this one would be paid for by big employers, by tax on employers. Also, that tax on employers would benefit well-off women more than average women. I don't get it. I didn't get it from the get-go. I have supported with our organisation a minimum safety net amount of paid parental leave, which is working well and having a really positive impact. So I don't know why we need this Rolls-Royce version that's going to put a tax on our members at a time they can ill afford it.
And finally, you're now on the Reserve Bank board, your first meeting coming up next month.
Yes.
Will your role there be, given the industry background that you have, as a champion of industry? Is that essentially how you see your role there?
No, I see my role as supporting the whole Australian economy. I mean, I think AO Group's always had a broader view of things, and so I really do believe that I'll have to look at all the information in front of me and make a judgment more broadly and in the interests of what I think are important for the Australian economy. Obviously, my industry background will be very helpful in making judgments and understanding the dynamics of the economy, what works and what doesn't work, what's important and what's not important. But my views will be about the whole economy, just not about a narrow sectoral view.
Right, Heather Ridout, thank you.
Thank you.
New Reserve Bank board member Heather Ridout there, soon to finish up at the Australian Industry Group.